That looks like it's working now.
So you should be able to go ahead.
Perfect, thank you. So good morning, everyone, and welcome to the third meeting of the Climate Change, Environment and Growth Executive Advisory Panel. Just a quick reminder, although I know we all know, the panel is being live streamed on YouTube, and therefore in the interests of clear viewing and so everyone can speak clearly, please keep yourself on mute unless you wish to speak, in which case please raise your hand. So we'll head on to agenda item 1, which is apologies for absence.
Yeah, we haven't received any apologies for absence. Perfect,
thank you. Councillor Graham Lawman does give his apologies. He was going to attend, but unfortunately can't any longer, given that some of the areas we're going to discuss fall within his remit. But I'm sure he'll pick up on anything that's discussed. Agenda item 2, do we have any declarations of interest?
We haven't received any declarations prior to the meeting.
Perfect, thank you. Agenda item 3, minutes of the last meeting, which were all circulated. Are we all happy with these, which include the formatting that was asked for last time? I can see some nods and some thumbs up, so I think we're happy there. Okay, so moving on to the substantive part of the agenda, we've got agenda item 4, which is the tree strategy. Hope you've all had a chance to look through this. At this stage, I'll hand over to Jonathan Waterworth, who's going to take the panel through the strategy. I think it would probably be helpful if you've got questions and comments to keep those to the end for us to go through. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, members. I do have a short presentation to take you through, which hopefully is appearing on your screens now. So all I've done here is pull out some of the key points from the report in terms of the tree management and planting opportunities for North Northants. Okay, so first of all, there is a growing recognition of the importance that the role of trees plays, particularly in mitigating climate change, and this has culminated in government pledges, namely the 30,000 hectares per year of new tree planting to be undertaken by the end of the current Parliament across the country. And also the England Trees Action Plan, which sets out national steps to deliver a long-term plan for expanding the treescape, along with a new national planning policy framework, which gives new powers to local authorities to get the right trees on new developments. And then more widely, we've also got biodiversity net gain on the horizon, along with the Environment Bill that's working its way through Parliament. So you'll see that there is a real significant push to see more trees in the environment. And I suppose the challenge for the council and officers and members is piecing together all these different initiatives so that we really get the best for North Northamptonshire in terms of growing our tree canopy. So why do we want trees? I think it goes without saying that they support nature, the recovery of nature, the connect habitats, they reduce carbon dioxide. There can be an economic benefit with the sale of timber. They support flood risk mitigation, and I suppose two very important points is that they do support our well-being, and they provide an important landscape feature, providing a sense of place, which I think over the last 15 months, everyone has, or most people have, reconnected with nature in a particular way and really seen the benefit of the natural environment and what trees can provide. But whilst there are all these benefits, there are some drawbacks. Looking after trees is expensive. It does require quite a specialised skill set, and having trees is not without risk and liability. And we do have a duty to inspect and maintain our tree stock. So how do we approach our tree management across the council? At the moment, we've got a mixture in terms of how we do that. We have an in-house team covering the Corby Kettering area. But then in other areas, we have a contracted out arrangement. And the approach and the works that are undertaken in those respective areas differs. So from proactive maintenance, but in other areas, the focus is predominantly on safety works. And I suppose budget is a driving force behind that in part. But it's also worth noting that the council is not responsible for trees in its locality. We do have arrangements with town and parish councils where they're responsible. And I suppose our approach to tree planting has been mixed. We've had some success with tree planting, particularly in areas of Corby and Kettering, but that's often been associated with significant capital investment. But I suppose reviewing how we look after our trees, there are opportunities to align some of these points, particularly building on some of our in-house expertise. And then in terms of funding is out there for tree planting. We do have a live bid in at the moment, which is on the screen with the Forestry Commission. And you can really see from these figures that whilst there is a cost of tree planting, there's quite a heavy cost in terms of the aftercare and watering and maintenance, which is really where the benefit is in terms of trees reaching maturity. And we're also likely to see further funding opportunities, particularly given the national picture in terms of strategies. And there are opportunities with various funders. And I suppose the important point here is being ready for those future funding rounds. We've also got the Queen's Green Canopy, which is an initiative celebrating Her Majesty's Platinum Jubilee. Runs from October this year through to the end of next year. And we've started to already identify areas in country parks and open space where we can deliver planting initiatives in relation to this scheme, but also associated events with those planting that will take place. There's also an opportunity to work with schools and partners to really encourage the take-up of this scheme. So not just focusing on council assets, but wider in terms of businesses, schools and others really getting involved in this worthwhile scheme. And then I suppose one of the most important points, we need to get the approach to tree planting right. And whilst it's important in terms of the number of trees we plant, it's really more important the number of trees that actually succeed. Tree planting is a long-term initiative, and the benefits come when those trees reach maturity and add to the tree canopy. And so the underlying principle is the right tree in the right place, and with the resources and skills to ensure long-term maintenance of those trees. So in terms of strategy, this is the crux of where we want to get to, with a strategy that pulls together all of these points. We want to ensure a consistent approach to planting and management across the council. So how requests are dealt with in terms of trees that might be blocking satellite dish reception or sap on cars, those sorts of things need to be dealt with consistently across the council. But also at the heart of the strategy, we need to ensure that we protect our tree stock by replacing trees that are lost to decay or disease, but also that we preserve our tree stock for future generations. So we summarise some key considerations for the panel to consider, namely the harmonisation of tree management across the council. And as I've mentioned, a key constraint to that will be budget. But to help address that, the second bullet point, our approach and the skills needed to that management, and I do believe that will help us improve the management from the available budget. But also considerations how we progress the Queen's Green Canopy initiative and how we plan for future funding bids. We need to develop a strategy and policy, it goes without saying, to ensure a consistent approach. And the recommendation is that we establish a strategic tree forum to really sort of start drawing on all the skills across the council and pulling all these points together and succeeding on these initiatives. That concludes the presentation, Chair. I should mention that Sarah Parr, one of the co-authors and grounds maintenance manager for the Kettering and Corby service, has joined us as well. Should there be any technical questions that I'm not able to cover, but I'm happy to take any questions on the report, Chair.
Thank you, Jonathan. I think it's really useful that we're looking at this now as we've brought together different authorities that have different approaches. So it's good to see the detail around this that we had in the report as well. So thank you. Have we got comments, questions from members? Tim, Councillor Allibone, yours went up first.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This is great news that we're planting more trees. I mean, I plant trees on the farm, oak trees that I will never see in my lifetime. But I do remember talking to North some while back, and I think in the old sovereign days, the Wellingborough Borough has got something like 85,000 trees. And of course, we are talking about inspections. And the other thing I'd point out is the more trees we plant, the more inspections we're going to have. And I think we got a little bit behind with some of the inspections in the pre-unitary days. That's the only comment I'd make, but I'm fully supportive of this in any case.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Lee, and then I can see Councillor Dell, you're raising your hand. Don't worry.
Thank you, Chairman. Right, I welcome this. I would like to put myself forward to be on that tree forum, and wouldn't also be an idea to invite external experts in the community, people like from community groups who are already working in woodlands, planting trees, to sit on that forum to make a contribution, because they would probably do a lot of voluntary work in that respect as well, and have a lot of ideas, since they have made it their life's passion to look after trees. And I wonder whether this would also include hedgerows, or maybe we can discuss hedgerows in the climate action plan. So I hope that councillors and external experts can be part of that tree forum, and I would like to express an interest. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Do we want any comments back regarding that at this stage? Oh.
I'm happy to feedback, Chair, if I may. I mean, I think the membership of the tree forum is something we need to work through. I think that there's definitely an opportunity for external stakeholders to be involved in that at an appropriate juncture. I think initially, given the need to harmonise and pull some of the work together and find our focus as a council, I think initially it'd be good to not lose sight of that. But I'd certainly think there is an opportunity for community groups, parish councils, town councils to be involved in the work in terms of how we move forward, because it's not just, you know, as important as our own tree stock is. I think we do need to take into account the wider context. And I think things around, you know, rewilding verges, hedgerows, things like that, there's a part to play. We just need to make sure we don't lose sight of what we're trying to achieve in terms of the tree work. But certainly the membership is something we need to consider.
Thank you. Councillor Dell?
Hi, thanks ever so much. I've got a few comments from myself and also from Councillor Fedorovich, who wanted to speak but wasn't available. First off, this is an amazing report, and thanks very much to Sarah Paff for putting it together, as well as the other person. But there seems to be a big disparity between those managed in-house with the 2,000 trees in Kettering and Corby and East Northants and Wellingborough. Would that be due to, I presume it's due to it being in-house in Kettering and Corby and then contracted out? So obviously it'd be really good to see that, well, in-house across the north of the county now, because obviously there is a big disparity between the two areas. Some of the notes from Emily. There's mention in there about the heritage and landscape providing important features in our towns and countryside. I know this is probably slightly off topic, but is there any scope for potential for a new country park, say Kettering Country Park or something like that? She mentions there's a Home Office community ownership fund to buy back land for more park space available. I should also, well, the Operation Spring Bloom, I wasn't aware of this before, with the school children that get given bulbs to plant. Is that already running? Is that already initiated? And who's supplying the bulbs and or trees and or funding them? Is that all covered under the grounds team? And which schools are involved? Is it like a general thing that schools apply for? Or is it, do we go out and approach schools to see if they want to be involved? Because that's brilliant. You know, we need to get more of that. Obviously, if this does expand out, because it seems if it does expand out to be in-house across the north of the county, which I presume would be something that could possibly be looked at, we'd obviously need quite a few more members of the grounds team. So I don't know if Tresham, I don't think Tresham do things like, Tresham College that is, do things like arboriculture and forestry courses or permaculture design courses. You know, things like that should be pushed potentially in the local area to upskill the workforce and create, you know, green jobs. And while Sarah's here, I do want to say a big thank you for the whole pardon the weeds, we're feeding the bees thing, which is a slightly related pollinator strategy, because I think that came from Sarah and her team. They're a real shining beacon for NNC, to be honest. Just recently, there was a letter that went into the Northlands Telegraph extolling the virtues of the wildflower displays that we've got in Kettering and Corby, and it seemed to be the one thing that mentioned the council that didn't get any bad feedback on Facebook, which is very unusual, and should be celebrated. And also, when the trees go in, I mean, earlier this year, I noticed some trees being planted in a street near mine, some street trees, and it was only when I went to chat to the people putting them in that I found out that there was about 200 or 300 trees going in around the town at that time and around Kettering and Corby. And it seems like this is something we should really be shouting about across like our socials, with press releases out about how, you know, we are way ahead of the game here, it seems. So yeah, that's my comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Dell. Anybody want to feedback on any of those points raised?
I'm happy to start, Chair, if I may. So in terms of the disparity in terms of service provided, I think that's in some ways a historic arrangement, and I think the opportunity is how we look to move that forward, whether it's in-house or another, or working with a contractor to deliver their services in a different way. I think the linking in the point you made, it is important that we invest in those skill sets, in the training. We have our own tree gang that goes around looking after the trees, planting the trees. They're all trained appropriately, and I think that is something that we can really build on, because conversely, you know, buying in those services is expensive, and if we can make the budget and the numbers work, then that is a way we can solve some of the budgetary pressures in terms of looking after our stock. In terms of the question around New Country Park, I think that's certainly something on the list of things to look at, but most likely focus around extending country parks, existing ones that we already have, because it'd be more cost effective in terms of building the infrastructures there already. If we can expand the country parks, it adds to what's already there, and that would be more cost effective than perhaps creating a new country park. But it's certainly on the list of things to look at. And what will be interesting to see is if funding comes forward to help support that in terms of some of the government initiatives. And again, it comes back to being ready to do that. And I'm aware colleagues have looked at this in the past and do have plans, or at least in development, that potentially they can move forward with that. If I may, Sarah, I'll defer to the question on the Spring Bloom initiative to yourself.
Okay, the Operation Spring Bloom is something we've been doing when we were just at Kettering for about 18 years. The most expensive part of bulbs is the planting. So we offered free bulbs to all schools if they planted them in a place that would benefit their communities. That was how it started, but in the end it ended up being anywhere on their grounds that we would still offer free bulbs for, because they're reasonably cheap. It's been taken up by schools all across Kettering, and now we do it in Corby as well. When we came over to Corby, we do it in Corby as well. So we've got hundreds of schools and tens and tens of thousands of bulbs that have gone in over the years in schools. We decided that it might be a good opportunity to offer a native tree and just follow that same process. So this year, instead of offering bulbs, we could offer a native tree to those schools and provide them with details of, we could help them decide where to plant it, but also provide them with a video of us planting a tree, our tree gang showing them what to do to sort of empower them, and then tell them exactly what they needed to do so they could like work that into their curriculum, the protection of that tree and the growing of that tree. We just thought that would be a way that we could get a lot of trees planted that we wouldn't have to look after, because they would be within the school grounds and there would be a limited cost, but it would also, it's still on NNC land because they're within the schools, but they wouldn't have such an impact financially with all these new trees. Okay, was there anything else I could answer?
I think that covered the main points, Sarah, and I would like to reiterate the benefit that the rewilding and the feeding the bees scheme has had. I think it's been really well received locally, and I think it's certainly something in terms of comms and that scheme and the tree planting. That's certainly something we can push in terms of the promoting the work that we do.
Perfect, thank you. That's really useful information, and it's great work going on. So thank you to everyone involved. Councillor Bone.
Thank you, Chair. Sarah, can I come back to you? I understand that it's brilliant for Kettering and Corby, and having been there myself, it is stunning. I just think, looking at the report, there is a huge disparity between those two areas and the rest of the new unitary. And am I understanding that offer of the Spring Bloom is just for the schools in Kettering and Corby, or is it going to go out to other schools in the other areas?
Well, we planned with regards to the Queen's Canopy initiative. We had planned that would go out across the whole of the sites, all the sites, the whole of North Northants. We were trying to think of ways which we could easily administrate something that could go out to the whole of North Northants when we don't actually look after all the land in North Northants, and that was one of the opportunities, along with the country parks and the more natural sites, doing whip planting, which doesn't involve so much skill, and we could just have a gardener on site helping, or a ranger. So the whole of the Queen's Canopy was based around trying to reach out to those areas that we don't actually maintain. So yeah, across the whole site.
Thank you. Councillor O'Hara.
Hi, thank you. I'm late joining. I had problems with IT issues over here. Just a comment, really. I mean, what we do for the Spring Bloom and educating our children is fantastic, because the children will then educate some of the adults that perhaps aren't quite as aware and quite as updated. And obviously, as part of what we do, or what Simon will be aware of in creating and looking after our and protecting our open spaces, I think also we need to put in a comment there of what we've done, not just with the schools, but what we've done with our towns and villages, because we do give away bulbs, and we have planted them in the past, and Councillor Anley will know this, that's what we've done in the Kettering and surrounding areas, and that was a fab success, which is how we built on the bees process as well, you know, protecting our bees, etc. But the other thing that I'd like to say is that we not only do it in the schools, that we've actually taken it out and we've gone out into our pocket parks, and that might be a way of enhancing and involving more of the community, not just within schools. So I don't know whether that's something that could be looked at, because at the minute we rely on volunteers to look after the pocket parks, and it'd just be a nice place to actually put things in, which we do anyway. But I think there's an argument to be had to create even more open spaces within all the new estates that are being built, which at the moment are looked after by management companies, and hopefully that in the future that would be more the case, that we can look after them ourselves within North Northants. But that's food for thought for planning in the future, I think.
Perfect, thank you. And I'm sure we're all writing down all of these comments. Councillor Lee.
Very quickly, that tree planting event, it was the cooperative party that arranged the trees, came from the Woodland Society. So I'm not sure they came from the council, but the council certainly supported us. It was fantastic. They helped us, showed us, and we couldn't have done it without the support of the council. So thank you very much for that. That's always helpful. Thank you.
Councillor Dell.
Yeah, just a slight aside while I think about it. I just wanted to mention that Sarah Power and the grounds team are very willing to go out to community events. They've got an amazing street stall set up. I did a community festival a couple of weeks ago, and they came out and sort of taught people, talked to kids about the work they do. Had little like bits of tree that you could like make bee houses out of and things like that. And I was at the Burton Latimer Nature Festival the weekend before. They were there, and so if anybody knows of any events like this, you know, it's great that there's this outreach that the grounds team do. Just wanted to add that as a comment.
Perfect, thank you. No, that's good to remind everybody of. That's really good to know. So I think we've given that a good bit of discussion there. So if everybody's happy, we will move on to agenda item 5, which is an update on the climate change framework. So I'll hand over to, I believe, Rob Harbour for that.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, everybody. So members might remember that this item came to the last panel meeting, but it was a verbal update at that stage. Since we talked about it then, what I've managed to do is to extract the action plan from the climate change framework, and then add a column to the right hand side of the action plan, which enables us to provide regular updates on progress against those actions within the plan, and will also be helpful in terms of monitoring them. I think I went through a number of the actions last time where we'd either started or carried out work in relation to some of the actions within the plan, and obviously through doing this piece of work in updating the written plan itself, I've been able to add more into the updates. Obviously, it's all there within the paper that was circulated for members to see, and I think because of the number of actions within the plan, I wouldn't intend, Chair, to go through each on a line-by-line basis. I think I'm happy, obviously, to try to field questions from members of the panel in relation to any of the information in the plan as it stands. I think the thing that probably is worth explaining also to panel members is, as you're aware, we carry out climate change work across the whole authority, and so there is input that's required from a wide range of people, from not only within the Place and Economy Directorate, but also in some of the other directorates across the authority as well. So to try to help capture that information, what I've done is set up, in effect, a virtual team. I've now got about 17 officers from across the whole authority co-opted into that virtual team, and they have access to the document that you have in the papers today, so that actually they can update it in real time as they sort of are working on some of these actions. And it feels to me as though that's probably going to be the best way to ensure that we capture all the good work that is being done across the authority, and hopefully ensure that it's maintained in the most up-to-date form. So what you see before you today is obviously that updated action plan with the progress column in, and the information within that progress column is a combination of either stuff that I've put in there myself, or also other officers from across this virtual team who are working on some of those actions or initiatives themselves. So having explained that, Chair, I think probably best thing to do is, and I can see hands going up already, is to probably take questions from members.
Thank you, Rob. I think it's really useful to have a visual update on the framework so that members can look through this and see where we're at. I think it's clear that whilst there's still a lot of work to do, there is lots of work going on, which is really good to see. And I think the setting up of the virtual team will be a really useful tool in really embedding greenness into what we're doing across Northamptonshire. So Councillor Bone, your hand went up first.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Rob, can you just let us know any progress on the climate change training for other members? I mean, it's great, the members of this panel. I think I'm obviously not as educated as some of the other members, but I'm getting there and getting sort of locked into it. But I think other members will benefit from it. And I know that that was discussed earlier, and I see that it's in the column. But any progress on that?
Yes, so Chair, through you, we are making some progress in terms of making inquiries of some potential different training providers that can come in and provide that training to members. But also there are courses that are run, so online courses, for example, for members through different kind of organisations. And I think we've got an inquiry in at the moment because there was a potential limit on the number of members and what we wanted to do was to establish whether or not actually we could sign more members up to that. And in which case, what we can then do is, as well as hopefully put our own training on, which I realise we need to prioritise in terms of the actions on this plan. But also signpost members to other sources of training, particularly online training events, where members can potentially also gain more information and more expertise themselves.
Thank you. I think it's clear from the discussions members have had on this panel and full council that it really is a priority to get the training sorted. And I know that officers are conscious of this. Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Chair. Right, it's good to make a start on this, but it is time now to proceed with metrics in point 1.2. It says the last point, metrics and targets, including cashable outcomes, invest to save. And I find very little metrics, no metrics really. There isn't even any mention of the resolution that was passed of becoming carbon neutral. Actually, that is further up until by 2050, but there is no clear indication of, for example, what you mean by short term, medium term. Then it really is time now to put timelines on there. And I think there is widespread agreement throughout the United Kingdom of a need to reduce carbon emissions by 45%, the carbon emissions from 2010, to reduce them by 45% by 2030, and targets like that we are not including here. Just by saying we're working on it is not. It doesn't give us enough target, not enough measurements. We need to measure progress, see by how much we reduce our carbon footprint. And then in that same point 1.2, it says on the right, development of corporate plan with priority. Well, actually, since we're looking at the corporate plan today, all we say in our corporate plan is that we want a key measure of success is a lower carbon footprint. No, it should be a lot. It should be expressed a lot more specific than that, because otherwise we're not going to get there. And lastly, I would repeat that the hedgerows are not mentioned in here, or waterways, and it's very important that we keep sight of our waterways and also of flooding, because we're supposed to do, in the local plan it says that the council should have an annual flood plan, and that's not mentioned in here, I believe. So these are my initial comments. Thank you.
Okay, well, Chair, if I come back on some of those, then yes, I'm well aware that we don't have the metrics, and a part of the problem for that is that we didn't have metrics across all of the sovereign authorities. Because there's a great deal of variance in terms of, I think, who was actually measuring what. But then there's also the issue around trying to pull that information together, both in terms of baseline, but then in terms of projecting how we move forward. And that does require some resource. And as we've discussed before, we at the moment lack in-house resource to undertake that work. So in order to try to address that, one of the things that I've discussed with the chair is putting putting out a piece of work to a consultancy that can actually undertake that baselining and metrics piece of work for us, that provides us with, I think, what we will need in order to go forward and establish what you're talking about, Councillor Lee, which is in effect a kind of a target date for when we might become carbon neutral. I think there's a real danger in just plucking a date out of thin air at the moment. It needs to be a date that's informed by data and information, so that we actually agree as an authority a target which is challenging but will be achievable, because there's no point, it seems to me, as an authority, putting in a date without having that information sitting behind it. Otherwise, we potentially set ourselves up as an authority to fail. And I don't think that's what we want to do. We want to set ourselves up as an authority that sets a target and then achieves it. So it has to be based on that data. So in answer to that, yes, we need some capacity to help us get the data and the metrics. And I think that's what then helps us to put in a more detailed strategy and action plan, where we can have timelines against some of these things, but we know that they are realistically deliverable for the authority as well. So we'll move towards trying to engage a consultant to come in and do that piece of work for us.
Chair, could I very quickly just correct? We do have data. We have a government. The government has published data, their estimates, but they were in the 90-page document that we've got. They're in there. The data start from 2005 up to 2018, and it shows that Corby meter has reduced. It's actually broken down per for each of the 4 districts in our authority, showing how much reduction we've made.
I don't think we have up-to-date data, though, Councillor Lee, is the issue.
After 2018, no, but that doesn't. It doesn't mean that we. So just a lack of data is not a reason why we cannot put forward figures and aim to reduce our carbon emissions by 45% by 2030, for example, because we do have that data.
Well, I think what we need to do is establish that is an achievable target, and the starting point for that is up-to-date baseline data, which is, as you rightly say, we don't have at the moment. And that's what I'm saying to you, is that our starting point has to be to collect up-to-date baseline data across the whole of Northants, and then to project forward from there to establish whether the kind of target that you're talking about is achievable to us, and then that has to be a decision of the authority as to whether they're prepared to sign up to that as a target for carbon neutrality, or indeed whether they think that target isn't challenging enough and they want to try and move something forward. But so these things are a work in progress, as are the other things. And I know you mentioned on here information which you think is either missing or incomplete in relation to this paper and the update on progress. And there will be more information. I am still forming that virtual team, and there will be more officers that are doing work that will be able to feed into this. But at the moment, I'm trying to do this on my own. And there's a limit to what I can achieve, between each of these meetings.
Absolutely, that's why I was in favour of dedicated staff. Sorry.
Which again we acknowledge and we're working towards. So this is not fully on deaf ears, and it's not that these things aren't in progress, but some of these things do take some time to achieve. And I think what you can see in the paper that's before you today is that we are making good progress with quite a lot of the actions. There will be more to put on there because, as I say, there are more people across a large organisation, not far off 3,500 people, and with the best will in the world, I don't know every person in the authority that might be doing something that contributes towards climate change in this action plan. So it's going to take me a little while to try to capture everybody that needs to feed into this, that's actually working towards it. So you're quite right. There is stuff around green and blue infrastructure that we'll need to capture and go in. But this is where we are at this moment in time. When it next comes back to you, it will have evolved again, and there will be more information on it, and we will have more people feeding into it from that virtual team, and you'll see more progress.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rob. And I think that was a useful discussion we had there. Obviously taking away all the points that are raised here, and like Rob says, I think we're all keen to see someone else in post helping with all of this. But there is good work going on, which is pleasing, and I'm sure that we will be really, really storming ahead as we go forward. Councillor Dell, I think, yes.
Yeah. Hi, thanks, Councillor Pentland. Yeah, great. Thanks for clearing up some of the information about the report. I have got a big list, as I mentioned earlier. Councillor Fedorovich couldn't come, and she did send me a big list of things which I'll get her to forward on to you, because we won't, as you said, we don't want to go through line by line. But I've picked out some specifics. It's really good to hear you've got a virtual team in progress. Those 17 officers, I'm sure, will be a great help to help getting you to fill in the blanks. I would mention that on 1.5, there is still some bits slipping through the net. So there's a new Section 106 monies of 2 million going into Kettering to redo a roundabout and a junction outside Wicksteed Park. However, that, which I think was approved at the exec in July, but those road plans, the roundabout, don't actually include any plans for cycle lanes or any active travel. So obviously we've got the LSWIP later, so I presume over the next however many years the LSWIP's put in progress, that will need to be retrospectively fitted, which obviously I'd hope that this is the last time that something like this could slip through. Obviously those plans would have been put in place before any of this took place, but yeah, it would be good to good for that not to have happened, really. So okay, I think that must have slipped through. Regarding so are we still looking to hire supporting officers? I know you mentioned that the 17 officers that you've got that co-opted in, but I presume we're still looking to hire more specific officers for this as well. The 1.8, that sounds brilliant. That there's the links in with the different local groups. I'm sure there's more local groups out there as well that would be really appreciative to be involved. On point 3 about waste, have we got a bit of a time frame about when that review is likely to be complete? Because obviously we're receiving casework still from people saying food waste isn't being collected here and all that kind of thing. So I presume that's in review, and it'd be good to get like a potential date on that. The LEAP fund, the LEAP project, could that be used to help develop the baseline data for the council property? Would that be part of that? So that'd be quite handy. And the heat network exploration, I was wondering about the heat network. Does that involve incinerators? Because I know I haven't seen them mentioned before. I know there were waste incinerator plans in Corby. I'm just wondering what that heat network involves. And I think we mentioned this earlier, but the pollinator strategy is already developed. This is on section 4 now. And will we be looking to roll that out across the rest of the county as well? And we already mentioned the supporting green jobs locally. There's plenty of scope for green jobs. And the last point on 7.1 is that the Citizens Assembly, obviously it may not seem like a priority, but it is a key way to educate residents and create potential climate champions from those residents that are involved. And it helps bring the public on board, because then it's not like the council imposing things on them, which they may not see as positive. And it would be representation from the people that would then allow maybe better, if we have got to do something controversial, then with the support of the public via a citizens assembly, that would really help out. So I was just wondering if there's any progress on looking at those or investigating the costs or potential what we can do there. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'll try and come back on as much of that stuff as I can, but I will caveat that by saying I don't know everything about everything. So, and that's why this virtual team is important. But yes, the virtual team really is our way of, I think, trying to capture and harness the work that is going on across the whole organisation that contributes towards climate change and our sort of targets and strategies and where we want to head with that. But yes, you're quite right. The intention is that we will move to recruit some dedicated resource, and that really is well needed. And my intention here is twofold: is one, to try and bring in some interim resource. I think I talked to the panel before about the need in terms of thinking about long-term structures across growth and regeneration, and how climate change resource fits into that. Is it needs to be considered slightly more holistically. And of course, it also takes some time to recruit permanent members of staff. Probably, as a very minimum from start to finish, it's three to 4 months, and sometimes longer than that. So my intention is that we try to bring in at least some interim resource to replace the likes of Sarah Earle, who left the authority, so that we have a little bit of capacity to enable us to drive some of these things forward. Because, obviously, this is going to sound like a sob story, and I don't want it to. But there's a limit to how much time I can invest in this, not as much as I would like, because obviously my attention is spread across a number of areas, which is why I think we need to bring in some dedicated resource, firstly in the interim, to fill the gap until we've managed to recruit permanent members of staff that can then sort of bolster our ranks, provide that specialist resource, and really help to drive these things forward. But also in relation to things like collecting that data and those metrics and so on and so forth that we need to do. So that's the one thing there. So an interim officer to help with some of the sort of the operational work, and in some respects, the thing that you talked about towards the end there, Councillor Dell, in relation to working with the community and those kind of things, that's just something that, yes, we do need to do, but it just requires some capacity to be able to actually do the work to set those things up. And that's why I think it's important that we try to bring in some resource that can help us to move those things forward. And then I think on top of that, as I said, we will try to bring in some consultancy advice that will help us in terms of that benchmarking information, the action plan, the timelines, and what we can look at and propose going forward in terms of potential targets for carbon neutrality and that kind of thing. So I think there's a sort of a multi-staged approach to trying to bring in that specialist resource to enable us to drive stuff forward more than we already are. So that will sit in effect alongside the virtual team, but help to work with them and push stuff forward and capture information and so on and so forth. Moving on to some of your other points, the roundabout is obviously a long-standing affair. It was something which was identified, more than a decade ago, and so it goes back an awful long time actually. And the designs for that roundabout were done. Oh gosh, as a guess, I would think probably 5 years ago. I do think that there is an issue along that traffic corridor in relation to land availability. And of course, one of the things that you find particularly in relation to how you design a roundabout, is a roundabout has to be a certain size and geometry dependent upon the traffic that flows around it. And obviously, the more traffic that flows, generally, kind of the bigger roundabouts tend to get, and they take up more land. And then, of course, if you're then looking to try and put in cycle lanes or whatever alongside that, then obviously the land take kind of gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So it's not something I know for sure, and I'm not a highways engineer. That's not my not my profession. But what I suspect is that it's probably in part due to when this thing was designed, which, as I say, is going back quite a few years now. But it's probably also due to the availability of land in order to try and fit in everything that we need to make that revised junction work properly. I think you're quite right, though, in terms of how we move forward with these things. We do need to ensure that there is a very coordinated approach between active travel and trying to encourage people into walking and cycling and making that easy and accessible to them and safe for them to do. So we do need to try to incorporate that into designs as we move forward. Absolutely. Gosh, I'm trying to remember now the other things on your list that you talked about. Would you? Oh, yes, the heat network in Corby. No, it's totally unrelated to the incinerator. And the incinerator proposal, as you may be aware, is something which was consented some time ago by the former county council, but actually hasn't kind of progressed anywhere since. So it does sit as an extant permission in Corby. But my understanding is that at the moment there's no kind of developer interest in bringing anything forward there. The heat network, as I understand it, and this is the feasibility element of it, is actually looking at capturing heat from the Corby pool, because obviously in terms of the plant associated with the running of the pool, there's kind of residual heat that's generated through that. And my understanding is that it's looking at the feasibility of whether or not we can capture that excess heat in effect that's generated through that facility and use that in some kind of local heat network.
Perfect, thank you. Again, some really important points raised there, which are really good to be looking at. So we've got Councillor O'Hara.
Thank you, Councillor. Just a few points, really. Just picking up on what Councillor Lee was saying earlier, and isn't really touched on to any great extent, and perhaps maybe we don't need to, but I think it's a salient point that within Burton Latimer, we've now got a training centre for ground source and air source heat pumps, which might help Rob in terms of gaining some information. It might help us in terms of linking in with planning policy and trying to get contract to put in the right kind of heating systems, if you like. And another point was something Councillor Anne Lee said about waterways, etc. Obviously, we have the River Nen running through our county, and there's a lot of tributaries on that. And obviously, a lot of that, the local authority has to kind of manage the risk of flooding in partnership with the Environment Agency. And the Environment Agency obviously has a strategic overview for all sorts of flooding, which is obviously what we use within planning in terms of granting permissions to where people can build, etc. And I think maybe that's something that we should be encompassing within this our targets, really, because obviously the Environment Agency have got a lot of statistics that we could perhaps use that, and I'm assuming that's perhaps one of your virtual partners, I imagine. And I guess for us, we are kind of riparian owners in terms of we do have a responsibility to look after our rivers and watercourses. And there are a lot of associations around here that do that. I mean, I've paddleboarded and I've been paddleboarding for years. And part of the thing that we do, we've got quite a few groups set up now, and we'll go out, we'll clear trolleys out of the watercourses and rubbish and everything. But as do the Friends of the River Nen. But the British Waterways really do have overall responsibility for the canals and the rivers. And I'm just thinking, because the flooding that we had a few months back in Kettering and indeed in Northampton last year, it might be something that we could kind of look to and see what further work we are doing along those lines to protect people in their homes, and also to make sure that we protect our open space for the enjoyment. There's a symbiosis there that we need to provide homes, but in appropriate places. And I think that's something that we could encompass within this work that you're doing now, which is enlarge on what we've got in this document before us. It's a fabulous document, and like you say, it's the beginning. It's a jigsaw at the end of the day, and we are building that jigsaw and putting the pieces together and making sure that it all fits in an appropriate manner, and in a way that we can under promise, I guess, and over deliver, which would be really nice to do. Which is why we haven't put targets in that may not be achievable at this precise moment. But I think working with all these different people, we can achieve that. And I think it would be nice to put that in this report, or enhance this report, looking at our river management as well. I know that we're not responsible for it, like I said, but to work in partnership, it would help us to deliver on a number of issues, not least protecting our open spaces which is the furtherance of people's betterment of mental health, especially in a lockdown world and a COVID world that we now live in and will live in for some years to come. So, Chair, I wonder if that could be enhanced within this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Hara. Again, really salient points raised, and we're clear that we want to set targets for achieving these things, which we will do. Recently, I attended a meeting with the River Regional Park Group, and to hear more about what they do along our waterways as well, which was really interesting. And actually, at the recent executive meeting, that's slightly different, we looked at KPIs and how we develop these out to include more areas as we move forward as well. Were there any points you wanted to feed back on there, Rob, or were you happy just to note the comments?
I think very quickly, Chair, I am noting the comments as we speak. I think Councillor O'Hara is absolutely right. We do work very closely with the Environment Agency as a partner, and also with others such as RNRP. We obviously do undertake work in terms of flood investigation work, and in fact, I'm just going through a procurement exercise at the moment to ensure that we've got specialist contractor that's able to undertake those investigations from later this year when our current contract expires. So we do ensure that those investigations are undertaken, and obviously there are recommendations that come out of that in terms of flood risk management. And I think the other thing to say is that there are a number of capital projects which are in the offing at the moment in relation to flooding and flood management. And yes, we do need to do more in terms of feeding into this report around that stuff, because undoubtedly there is more we can say. I just need to capture the right people and get them to start feeding into it.
Perfect, thank you. Councillor Dale.
Yeah, just quickly, I just wanted to absolutely support what Councillor O'Hara then said there. I mean, for most people in North Northamptonshire, the effects of climate change will be seen mostly through flooding and through the heavy rainfall. Myself and my neighbours, our gardens flood when there's heavy rainfall, and I've been in contact with the Environment Agency and Anglian Water regarding this. I did notice yesterday there's something called the Oxcam Pathfinder project, which appears to have a floodmobile which goes around. It's actually in Pytchley today, so on my lunch I'm going to go ahead and have a see what that's all about, which I guess we should be promoting more, because people are going to be affected by flooding, and so it is good to have the resolution, have sort of ideas for residents so that they can deal with that flooding, which will happen. Yeah, thank you. I was just to add a comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, Councillor Lee, your hand's just gone up. You're on mute.
Sorry about that. Very quickly, my question about the time frame. What can stand by short term? Is that within the next 12 months approximately? I know you can't put a specific date on it, but what are we understanding by short term? Just because we are going to accept this report, and it's just useful to know what you mean by short term. Thank you.
Well, Councillor Lee, the timescale element of the action plan that you see there was actually that was developed by the Climate Change Task and Finish Group. That's not my input. So I think you're right. Short, medium, and long is slightly ambiguous, and we need to, I think, start putting some more specific timeframes against things. But I think that comes back to what I was saying before about needing to bring in this resource which can baseline where we are and then start to think about what we can achieve by when. And then I think what we can do is move away from maybe just that sort of short, medium, and long. And whether that's that we describe what short, medium, and long is, or whether that's that we start putting sort of specific target dates against particular actions. But yes, so it wasn't me that actually sort of developed the short, medium, and long thing. So I'm not entirely sure what was meant by that, but I think probably we need to revisit it anyway.
Thank you. And Councillor O'Hara.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a quick one, really. Rob, forgive me, did we not have training years ago now for flood wardens? And is that something that we would promote in the future, given our climate change and the way we do suffer from flash floods, etc., with our ever-changing climate? Because they were quite a good little network to be able to get people out. I know in Burton we regularly flood down the bottom end towards Bosworth, etc., because the water table is so high down there, and that corner is really quite dangerous. But it was really good because with the flood warden, they had all the contact numbers to be able to get the farmers out, so we could get people out if their cars got stuck and things like that. The farmers would come out. And it's just that flood warden was somebody who could kind of call people to action, if you like, and had all the contacts and all the and the protocols in place to make sure people were cared for and acted correctly, for want of a better word, and work in partnership with the council. So I don't know whether that's something that should be promoted more in terms of what Councillor Dell's just said, that I are aware of more.
I am aware that the flood and water team does work with communities and flood wardens. Obviously, we again are in a short-term position there of having a flood and water team without any direct NNC resource. So that's not to say that we aren't operational, but what we are doing is we're using the team in the West because it was disaggregated. So we're using the team in the West in the interim period to help cover us. So I think, yes, you're quite right. And it's something that I think we can pick up once we actually have our own sort of operational team in NNC, and we can and some capacity to look at those things. But my understanding is that they do quite a lot of work with local communities in relation to flooding and flood management, because it's not all about physical works to either build a wall to stop the water flowing into someone's house or whatever. There's a lot more attached to it, and a part of that is around the community. I suppose to some extent working in partnership to help take some responsibility that helps to sort of contribute towards flood prevention.
Chair, may I just say, yeah, that's exactly right, Rob. It is exactly that. It's a team of people to mitigate against and protect against and work towards, rather than somebody who's just called to action when the worst thing happens, i.e. people are flooded out. So it's something that's proactive, and I just thought it'd be nice to promote the fact that we do that, and we have got flood wardens around and people who are educated to deal with an emergency that arise. And I just think it'd be nice to enhance that if we can. It doesn't take an awful lot of money. It just takes some education and a call to people to be within their community and ready to help. People who've got Land Rovers with winches on, or just four-wheel drive, really. It's something should happen, and it's not just about the flooding. It's about other things that may happen within the area if we have a dry season. So it's just a comment, really, that it'd be nice to enhance that and promote it.
That's
Thank you,
noted.
Chair.
Thank you. So I think we've had a good discussion there, and so I'm keen to move on to agenda item 6, which is looking at the corporate plan. So going to hand over to George Candler to take us through this.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. Fascinating listening to the discussions thus far, and hopefully that and the next item may help with some of the discussions we'll have on the corporate plan. So I'm just going to talk briefly about just to refer briefly to the covering report before we get into the appendices. When we get to the appendices, I'll share my screen if that's okay, so that you can see the sort of different areas that I'm referring to. So in terms of corporate plan, I think the first thing to say is it's sort of the building block for the local authority. In effect, it's the business plan for the local authority. And this process actually started last year when the draft visions were being scoped by the then North Hants Shadow Authority. But a paper did come to our executive on the 15th of July that you'll see referenced in the main report, which was setting out the indicative timeline and the process that we're going to adopt in developing the corporate plan for Northamptonshire Council. And in terms of that pre-work, last year there was a stakeholder consultation that was carried out as well, and also quite a bit of work through a dedicated working group developing that draft vision, and we've since started to draft out the values as well, which you'll see and we'll touch on briefly on the appendices. So the purpose of this session is essentially for the advisory panel to provide their thoughts and their comments on the draft content. And I do stress this is draft. So each of the elements that are pertinent to the executive advisory panels, and as we know, we've got 5 of those, and we've got 6 priorities, as you'll have seen in the draft corporate plan. So they'll go to the relevant advisory panel. So for this meeting, we'll be focusing on priorities 3 and 4, but predominantly priority 4, but we will look at priority 3, and I'll come on to those shortly. But I do need to stress it's work in progress, and I'm hoping that we'll get a second opportunity to look at the next phase of this. That may be virtual, so it may not necessarily coincide with the next formal EAP meeting, but hopefully be able to email a further iteration round to panel members to comment. And again, I think that just reflects the approach that we're taking in Northamptonshire, where we do want to, and it sort of reflects part of the wider, if you like, way we want to work, which is around that co-design and ensuring a range of key stakeholders, members, the public have an opportunity to comment. So the timeline I'll just touch on briefly is it is fairly rapid. So officers since that executive meeting back on the 15th of July have been developing out the plan. So that's what you can see in front of you and reflects a lot of the work that's been going on across place and economy. And the plan is to take these through each of the 5 EAPs during this month and September, and then looking to do some further consultation with the public with a view to getting the plan signed off either, I think, late September, but probably more realistically in terms of that final draft to executive in October, and then adopted by council, full council, on the 1st of December. So that's the sort of brief intro I just wanted to touch on, Chair. I'm now going to use my technical wizardry and try and share the screen with the appendices. So, oh, no, let's stop that. Stop sharing and start again. Share screen. So I suppose the first thing I just need to check is, can everyone see that? A thumbs up will do. Can you see that, Chair? Yeah, perfect. Okay. So forgive me, I'm going to sort of minimize. I'm going to do a bit of talking and then stop if that's okay. So Appendix A, so this is the sort of plan on a page that's been drafted today, and you'll see on each page there's the word draft, so it's still very much work in progress. So this is our plan on the page, which in essence covers our vision, our values, and our key commitments, as well as our priorities for Northamptonshire. The one thing I should have said, just going back to quite rightly the points Councillor Lee was making around timeline. So this will be a 4-year corporate plan, but will be refreshed annually. So because obviously the world moves on at quite a rapid pace, so it will be refreshed annually. But in essence, it's a 4-year plan. So at the centre of the wheel, as we're calling it, is the vision, which is still can still be further discussed and debated upon. But again, this is the work that was done by the working group within the Shadow Authority. And I'm not going to read everything out because I'm sure you can read that. And again, you've got some sort of keywords that surround that. Again, all up for discussion. Around the perimeter of the wheel is our values, which is sort of the if you like the core, how we will go about our daily business regardless of what we're actually doing. So that's around that customer focus piece, trustworthy, supportive, and so on. So a range of values that you can see around the wheel here. And then each of the pieces of, for those that know Trivial Pursuit, they look like pieces of pie in the Trivial Pursuit game. So each of those are the priorities in bold with a statement that supports that priority. So if I move across to the right-hand side, so the priorities, as you can see, are listed in 6 areas at the moment. The first one, and I don't like to sort of segment key areas, but this first one is around, as you can see, around that sort of wider social care and accessibility to leisure, culture and sport, health arena. The second is very much about how we ensure that we create the best start in life for children and young people here. The third is around quite a lot around what goes on across place and economy and the way that we work with communities, how we drive growth, how we attract inward investment, how we develop the visitor offer, the skills development, but also ensuring that our highways network is fit for purpose as well as broadband connectivity. So quite a lot in safe and thriving places, and also quite a lot in greener, sustainable environment. And again, this is the area that we'll touch on in a bit more detail. So these are the priorities, and these are I should have said these are the sort of key objectives that sit below the priorities. Then we've got connected communities, which is very much about how we will work with, engage with all of our communities, whether that's town and parish councils, community groups, or indeed the voluntary and community sector. And then the final one is around the way that we will do business, that we will be efficient, that we will provide good quality services, that we want to have a focus around community hubs, an employer of choice, and so on. So 6 priorities supported by a number of objectives. I'll keep saying this, but all up for discussion very broadly. So moving on to Appendix B, I'm not going to touch on this too much. If I did speak to the chair prior to the meeting, we're going to go to Appendix B, but the greener, sustainable environment. So again, hopefully you can see that. And again, so the pages are going to broadly look like this. Again, the design, and I wouldn't get too hung up on colors at the moment or font sizes, but broadly, we've got to do a bit more work on the design. But it will take this format. So there'll be a covering page, for want of a better word, and then we will go into the actual details at a high level of the of this particular priority. So green and sustainable environment is the key area of focus. And again, we've got those key objectives, which refers back to the first page, sorry, plan on a page. And then below those, we've got some specific actions. So the we wills, as you can see there. And again, the way that this has been developed is working with colleagues across place and economy primarily, but also we want to test that with that wider virtual group that Rob was referring to. Knowing the work that's happening and needing to happen has created this draft that you can see in front of you. So this is the key area. We've also got some key supporting text over here, considering whether each of these has a key task. So on this one, it's around the climate strategy and action plan to be developed. But again, that can be further finessed. And we're also looking at putting in some key measures of success. And again, once we're clear on the content here, we'll probably want to reflect some of that in key measures of success. So that's very much been driven by, if you like, officers and what we know is happening and coming over the horizon, either in the next 12 months or the next few years. But what we've also attached is a further appendix, again, just purely for green and sustainable environment, as a sort of a further prompt, really. So is there anything in here that you've seen and read that actually you want to challenge as to why it's not in here, for example, which is our current working document for this particular area of focus. But there might be areas in here that you feel actually, whether it's the way it's been worded or specific we wills that actually may be better fitting into this area. And again, we can consider that. So what we thought for, I'm going to come off sharing screen now. Conscious there's quite a lot in there, very conscious, even though we are improving on getting papers out, we still, this one we were up against it, I think is fair to say, and we got this out yesterday. So there will be people that do want to take a bit of time to read this through and feedback comments, and that's absolutely fine. There will be some of you that clearly want to feedback comments now, and that's also absolutely fine. So what I was going to suggest is that even though we'll have a discussion now, please use the time between now and, if I may say, Monday, so Monday next week. If you've got further comments that you want to feed in, if you send those through to me for Monday of next week, then I can review those, have those discussions with Councillor Pentland and look to further refine this particular area. And similarly, sorry, I didn't touch on safe and thriving places. There are elements in there very much that reflect the executive advisory panel, because obviously the advisory panel also covers growth. Although, again, for colleagues, for members on this particular meeting, this is also going to the planning policy executive advisory panel tomorrow as well. So they will also be looking at the same slide deck, but probably focusing more on this safe and thriving priority number 3, as opposed to priority number 4. So I'm very happy to take feedback now. It's helpful that we've got Rob, Jonathan and Graham here as well, because obviously they through their teams, as well as Ian Smith in regulatory services, have all contributed towards this. So that's enough of me talking. I'm going to listen now to comments. Thank you.
Thank you, George, for running us through that. And clearly there's lots of work going into it. And as you said, it's important to stress it's a draft. I think it's great that we get a slice of the pie in terms of greenness, but we also get a slice of the pie in terms of being able to feed into this. So, Councillor O'Hara, your hand went up first.
Thank you, Chair. George, it's a fabulous piece of work, fabulous document. The input from it is amazing, and it draws together so much that our communities care about. I guess you're going to guess what I'm going to ask in terms of, can you protect our waterways and our pocket parks? Can that be put in Appendix A at 4? And the other thing, which I think is probably more for the Planning Policy Executive Advisory Panel tomorrow, it's the bit about that. I'm guessing it would go in B, the homes for healthy living, because that's something that we ensured that was agreed when we signed off on planning policy and our sovereign councils. And that's something that we would like builders to adopt, to make sure that we build homes that are ecologically sound and fit for the future. So I think that's imperative that we put that in this document. And obviously, because we've only just had it, I will send you some comments. I don't think it's really appropriate in this meeting, because I think it's something that, like you say, it's draft, and I think it is a fabulous document. So well done to everybody who's been involved in that, and thank you for sharing it with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Hara. And just on that, if you are sending points across to George, I'd be really grateful if you're happy to copy me into them. Obviously, that's a personal choice, but it would be useful for me to be able to see those comments, etc. Thank you. So we've got Councillor Allibone.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I would agree with Councillor O'Hara. It's a good piece of work, very comprehensive piece of work, Mr. Chandler. I just wanted to pick up just one phrase on priority 4, where you get down to discouraging. The word is discouraging littering. We've always adopted a bit of a carrot and stick approach in the past, and I think the word discourage should be much more robust. I think what actually we need is a stick, and then a bigger stick, frankly, because we're getting massive amounts of littering and fly tipping, over 1 million cases a year reported now. And we can discourage all we want, but I think we've got to really tackle this now. And I think the word discourage needs replacing with something far more robust. But a great piece of work, and I'm supportive of it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Allibone. I think that's a fair point. Yeah, it's points like that really. It's just getting that feel from members about how firm you want us to be in some of what we're scoping. Just going back to Councillor O'Hara's points, yeah, absolutely. I suppose what we're trying to do with the corporate plan, and I should have said this earlier, is this, if you like, is the sort of key foundation of Northamptonshire Council. What will sit below that is the more detailed directorate and service plans that will carry a lot more detail around the actions specific to those we wills, for example, and then below that there will be team focus, and then below that there will be individual appraisals and performance plans for colleagues. So if you like, there's a natural route through from what people are doing in their own job. They can see how that contributes to the team, how that team contributes to the directorate, and how that then in turn contributes to the overall future direction of the council. So some people use the term golden thread all the way through the organisation, but that is absolutely something we do. So this is the key sort of building block of that particular process. So the points that you were making, Councillor O'Hara, I think are absolutely well made. Where they sit, I'll just need to give some thought to whether that's in the corporate plan or whether that's in the directorate or specific team plan. But absolutely, points well made. Thank you both. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Bone.
Yes, I was going to say, but George has just answered a point I was going to raise, so I'll mute myself again. Thank you.
That's fine. Thank you. Councillor Dell.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just again to echo the comments to say this is a really great piece of work. Like you say, there's a lot in there, so we will be feeding back. But it's good to hear that it's refreshed annually, because obviously with the climate and everything changes quite quickly. With they had the new IPCC report, and we've got COP26. So in a year's time, this could well be needing more work to change things. Yeah, so yeah, we'll get some stuff over. I'm sure if it's okay, Councillor Fedorovich will be interested to put some input on this as well. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. And we look forward to hearing those comments once members have had an opportunity to really go through it. And I'm sure we'll get to a really good place with it in the end. If there are no other points on that, and conscious of time, George, did you have anything you wanted to finish off with, or happy for us to move on?
No, just through you, Chair. Just as you say, any comments? It is comprehensive and detailed. So yes, any comments through to myself and Councillor Pentland will be great, and then we can review those and provide a further update. As I say, that might be virtually, so that you can see how your views are being factored in. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll now move on to agenda item 7, which is a progress update on the local cycling walking infrastructure. So handing over to Graham Kane for this.
Thank you very much, Chair. I realise I can't actually present the PowerPoint, I'm afraid, in the way that I'm accessing the Zoom call. So I don't know if one of my colleagues, either Raj from Dem Services or one of my other colleagues, are able to pull the presentation up as I'm doing a quick introduction. But apologies for that. I'm not technically able to do it. So local cycling walking infrastructure plans, we've talked about this in passing in a number of the previous meetings, and you were keen to hear an update, so we're very happy to bring that to you. We've got 3 presenters here who have joined the call. I'll introduce them quickly and tell you who they are, and then when they come up they can hopefully introduce themselves again. Thank you, Simon. I see you've put the presentation up there. That's very helpful. Thank you. So first of all, in actual fact, I will introduce Simon. So Simon is a development manager within planning policy, particularly in the Kettering area, and he'll give an update on the Kettering LC WIP. We've also got Esme Cushings, who's a principal transport planner within our highways department, and also Nikki Hyde-Pulley, who is a principal travel choices officer who works on active travel initiatives within our highways team as well, a transport team. So I welcome each of them to give a presentation. And I appreciate I didn't introduce myself for those who don't know me or people watching online. I am, of course, the Assistant Director for Highways and Waste. So I think without further ado, I'll pass on, particularly mindful of time, Chair, I'll pass on to my colleagues who will take you through, first of all, what an LC WIP is briefly, and then take you through what we're doing on LC WIPs across Northamptonshire. And then finally, Nikki will take you through the capacity funding that we've got from DFT, Department for Transport, and how we're using that to try and encourage and promote active travel amongst our communities. So I think I'll pass over, I think it's to Esme, first of all.
Yeah, I've got the first slot. So good morning, everybody. Yeah, as Graham said, I'm going to give you a sort of brief overview of LC WIPs. So back in 2017, the first cycling walking investment strategy, the CWIS, was published by the Department for Transport, and it set out the government's ambition to make walking and cycling the natural choice for shorter journeys or as part of longer journeys. And ultimately that strategy was about transforming local areas by tackling congestion, improving physical and mental health, and supporting local economies. And following the publication of the CWIS, the government guidance also recommended that local authorities develop local cycling walking infrastructure plans. And so these documents are a new strategic approach to identifying cycling walking improvements at a local level. Ideally, they focus on a 10-year period, and they're really about creating a very evidence-based approach to designing cycling and walking networks. And they're a mixture of desktop analysis, looking at existing and future behavioural changes, sort of mixed in with undertaking site audits. So they're quite intensive pieces of work. And then you prioritise schemes based on sort of bring the greatest benefits for walking and cycling. But that also sort of takes into consideration deliverability of schemes as well. And the LCWIPs are really about targeting those people who don't currently cycle. And so the focus is on sort of short trips. So within that, we're sort of talking about sort of up to 5 kilometres. And so therefore, there's a very kind of local focus for the LCWIPs. We're taking the view that it's better to sort of concentrate on the main towns on quite a focused area to design infrastructure. And the typical approach is to make the infrastructure sort of suitable for you know, a typical 12-year-old, so that they can, you know, so it's that sort of quality of infrastructure that we're looking to provide, so that those 12-year-olds can use it to get to school on their own. And you know, it's very kind of you know, trying to get towards that Dutch approach of having a really high quality sort of cycle infrastructure. So if you just move on to the next slide. Thanks, Simon. Yeah, so it follows a 6-stage process which has been set out by DFT, which broadly follows agreeing sort of the scope of the area, gathering the data, and that's looking at where people are coming from, where they're travelling to, and it's also will be looking at you may be aware we had a commonplace consultation last year as part of the Active Travel Fund, where we got a lot of input from local residents about where they wanted to see improvements. So we'll be reviewing all that data and feeding that in, and also sort of auditing, planning the routes and prioritising the schemes. And DFT have a number of tools like the propensity to cycle tool, which helps inform the process. And obviously a very key point to this will be about engagement with key stakeholders, so councillors, but also other interested groups, including particularly disability groups. But also we're just really trying to capture, as I said before, those people that don't currently cycle or walk. So also be engaging with public health colleagues as well. And yes, so the key outputs are a network plan, which identifies the routes which have been identified through the LCWEC process. So this might be existing routes that need improvement, or it might be totally new routes, or providing missing links. Another output is a programme of improvements, and also a very detailed technical report, so that really provides the meat of kind of the evidence base. And so to kind of make it a bit more palatable, or you know, easy to understand, we're also hoping to provide a summary document which outlines the key outputs of the LCWIP as well. So I think I'll pass over to Simon now, because he's going to talk about the Kettering one.
Good morning all. Can you all hear me okay? I can't see you at all, so I'll carry on as long as somebody doesn't shout out you're muted. So if I update you on the progress that's being made with the Kettering LCWIP, WSP has been commissioned to prepare this document. We have a good working team on board. That includes experienced practitioners from WSP. So they've got there's a catalogue of other LCWIPs that they've worked upon up and down the country. But we've also included a local enterprise partnership body in Brightways. That's Alison Holland. So with that, she brings some local knowledge as well as our own local knowledge, and a skill around public engagement, which we consider to be significant in this instance. We think it's important to pick up upon the local knowledge and awareness and start building a theme that runs throughout the Kettering LCWIP, which strengthens its ability to be able to deliver outputs. The team is at an early stage in its preparation. So if you're able to see the detail there, stage 2, we're going about gathering information. Included within that are stakeholder contacts and the likes. So those will be invited along to a stakeholder event, but also advise us on making the material available to the public as well. Stage 3 will follow, and that will identify interventions for cycling and walking before bringing them together. So that's where you can see the two avenues separate and then come back together to provide us with a more comprehensive and joined up document. Then moving on to a bit more on the detail and timescales. So the scope of the LCWIP is intended to cover Kettering Town, and we're drawing a 5-kilometre radius, which is the standard to capture Kettering. We've extended it slightly to include all of Burton Latimer instead of it sweeping through. and it also, with that, includes many of the main employment areas and Hanwood Park, the main growth element of the town as well. In terms of sources of information, we're currently going through a set of information that's available to us. That includes a propensity to cycle tool, which is based on census details from 2011. That's what's available to us. And looking at trip generators. So we're looking at main employment sites and visitor destinations. We're starting to get a feel for currently where those locations are and what parts of the town have a higher cycle presence running through them. We're also looking at barriers to movement, and those barriers can include rivers, roads, railways and the like. So it's sometimes over and under, or it just provides a clear block, which is discouraging for walking and cycling, or those that might otherwise wish to walk or cycle. In terms of stakeholder workshop, we're currently planned that's currently planned for late September. We're working hard to ensure that we meet that, and we also allow enough time for invites to go out for people to slot that into their diaries. It's important, I think, that we go along with some ideas for feedback on those ideas, but also for further development. And we also seek to gather and consider fresh ideas to be incorporated within the final document. Public, with regards to wider public engagement and consultation, we're looking at starting that in November. So it is still quite a tight timescale, but we're working hard to meet those. And then the final document we hope will be available by the end of the year. One aspect I think that links into is that we want to seek to secure as much as we can, as early as we can, in terms of funding opportunities, any bid mechanisms, any bid mechanisms that might become available. So that's all I have to say at this stage. I'm happy to take questions later, but I think I'm handing over to either Esme or Nikki.
Yeah, I think it's back to me, Simon. Yeah, so I was just going to kind of go through the other LCWIPs that we've got in development at the moment. So for Rushden and Higham Ferrers, we produced a draft document. So that was produced by the former NCC. But since it was developed, government brought out some new guidance, so LCN 120. So that's the new cycling guidance. So we need to review that document to make sure that the schemes that we proposed previously and now meet that guidance. And we also want to do that exercise in incorporating those commonplace comments before we undertake some wider stakeholder engagement and public consultation. So we're hoping to undertake that consultation in the autumn. This work is sort of being resourced through the capability funding. So we applied to DFT in April, and we've only just heard from them in August. So that's why it's sort of subject to resourcing, because we were waiting to hear from that. So we need to get some extra capacity within the team. So that's why that kind of date may have to change based on sort of that delay from DFT in terms of confirming that we've got that funding. So in terms of Wellingborough, Sustrans have been commissioned by North Northants Council, and they've completed a first draft. So that was completed in June. Highways, we've now made some comments and seen that document, and we've sent through some initial comments for consideration. So I think, again, some further stakeholder engagement will be needed before public consultation can be undertaken. So again, we're aiming for sort of autumn, but again, that may slip based on that delay from DFT. Move on to the next slide, Simon. Yeah, so in terms of Corby, so we haven't started any work on the LCWIP as yet, but there's some real opportunities in Corby due to the sort of generous amounts of highway land. to provide sort of the fully segregated cycleways that LTN 120 are really looking for. So I think there's some great opportunities there. So we plan to start this year, but I think realistically the consultation is likely to fall into next year. Yeah, so as well as sort of developing the LCWIPs, there's also we're going to be developing an active travel strategy. So this will be sort of an overarching strategy which will aim to set out the ambition of active travel in North Northants. And so the LCWIPs will sort of sit beneath this strategy and set out those priority schemes. So again, that's another document that we're developing. So there's lots of work to be done, and as I say, we need to sort of get that additional resource into the team so that we can make sure that we meet those deadlines. So I'll hand over to Nikki next, I think.
Can't hear anything at the moment.
I can hear you, Nikki. Yeah.
Yeah, just to confirm, Graham, I can't hear anything either.
Okay, I think what we've got a situation here is I've had before, not for many months since actually, but where some people can hear and others can't, depending on the version of Zoom that that Nikki is using. So I can hear Nikki, but others can't. I think, apologies, Nikki's speaking. I appreciate some of you can't hear her, but it gets a bit confusing. Hang on. Esme, I don't know. Are you able to talk through this in some detail, even if you can't provide as much detail as Nikki was going to provide?
I can have a go. Yeah, so in terms of kind of so as I mentioned, there is this capability funds that we've applied to DFT for, and we've had confirmation of it. So supporting kind of the LCWIP in terms of making sure that the infrastructure's there. There's also this kind of separate work stream about behavioural change, obviously really, really important. So there's 50k of behavioural change for North Northampton. It's really concentrating on cycling training. So we're looking at child and adult cycle training, and we're really concentrating on sort of groups within that, so the BME as well, and that's something that's sort of been highlighted to us previously about some of those groups that need specific training to sort of access cycling. So it also includes cycle maintenance, so making sure that people can maintain their own bikes, and also building on a lot of work that I know Nikki's been doing with schools to look at school travel planning. So I think that there's 3 schools there which will have a reach of 1,500 students. We're also looking at doing some led rides, so taking people out on particular routes, and again, we're hoping to sort of involve at least sort of 40 people within that work stream. We're also looking at purchasing some bikes so that people can use that, and around the cycle security measures, so 75 security packs. And I know Nikki's also keen on doing some community active travel events, and I believe that that's working with Kettering Hospital in particular. So I'm sorry, that was a bit of a, I'm afraid I'm not quite as highly briefed on that as the LCWIP side of things, so apologies for that, but I'm sure if there's sort of any specific questions that people have, or I'm sure that Nikki could provide a briefing note, if that would be helpful to the group, just to sort of flesh out what I haven't been able to say there. So because I know it's a really exciting part of the capability fund, and I know Nikki's putting a lot of work around it. So yeah,
thanks,
sorry.
Thank you, Esme. Well done. Thank you very much for stepping in. And I just wanted to emphasise a point that Esme made, and that this slide goes on to make it a little bit more detailed here. These were activities that we put into a bid to DFT, which was then successful, as Esme was saying. The choice of activities, if you like, was influenced by previous things that we've done that were successful. And also based on feedback that we had from communities as to where they would like us to focus their efforts. So picking up on what Simon was saying around sort of barriers in terms of infrastructure, there's also social economic barriers for why people don't cycle. So the activities were based on that feedback to try and overcome some of those barriers and engage with and work with some of the groups within our communities who were finding it difficult to participate in active travel but would like to. And finally, it was also informed by DFT's own analysis nationally as to which groups it would be worthwhile for us particularly to engage with. So there's been analysis and thought, I can reassure you, in terms of which groups and which activities we use the capability fund to promote and progress. So I think that brings us, yeah, sorry, just hear her.
Chair, I think we might have lost. Oh, Graham, you...
Sorry, George. Nikki was just speaking. I know that not everybody can hear her, but she was just giving another little bit of detail, which I will pass on, but then we'll open up to questions, I think. Nikki,
okay, sorry, Graham.
Do you want to go ahead, Nikki? You finished? Okay, thank you. So Nikki was just emphasising again around the data that we had gathered, but I think the best thing to do is for Nikki to provide a briefing note, which we can do just to develop those last two slides out a little bit more. So Chair, sorry for that technical challenge we had there, but I hope that's helpful to members. I'm more than happy for me and my colleagues to take some questions on any of that, because I do know that not only is it a very important subject, but it's one of great interest to our communities and therefore members. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you, and thank you to all of the officers there. It was really useful to get an update, to learn more about these, and it's interesting to look at where we build upon the areas that are perhaps not quite as advanced with this. So I'm conscious we've got 10 minutes left of the scheduled time, so I think Councillor Lee, your hand was up first.
Thank you very much. I wanted to be the first to congratulate the team on excellent piece of work. I've been looking forward to this for a long time, and I'm very impressed. Can we please have a copy of the presentation? And it'd be great for this cycling plan to be supplemented by secure parking in the town centre, because that's something that puts me off sometimes, cycling in the town centre, taking a big heavy lock with me, and even then not being sure my bike will be there. But I know there's probably a different budget, but I just wanted to say great work. And if you're looking for members, I'll be very happy to take part, to help in any way I can. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, it's worth saying actually that cycle parking is an important part of the LCWIP and sort of the wider supportive infrastructure. So yeah, excellent. Take that on board.
Thank you. And I'm just going in the order that it's on my screen now, so apologies if it's not quite right. Councillor Bone.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It is a good report, but can I just put a bit of a dampener on it? This is not, envy is not a good quality, is it? But I'm concerned about the disparity again between the different areas. I think it's great for Kettering. Bit concerned about, well, particularly for Corby, who haven't even started yet. Wellingborough, we've got an ideal situation. I just don't understand why it's not as more advanced than it could be. And I understand about resource, but I'd encourage the levelling out to be hastened. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bone. Yeah, I think you've kind of answered the point you're making there. Really, it's about the resources that we have available. So you're right, we will do it all as quickly as we possibly can. And I suppose you have to start somewhere, and there were some reasons why Kettering it was progressed a bit earlier than others. But we will, of course, try and work through it as quickly as possible without undermining, of course, the validity of those plans. So they have to be done in a robust style rather than just rushing through them, if you like. But yes, I take your point, and unfortunately, we can't do everything at once, but we will try and progress them all as quickly as we can, so that all key areas or major towns at least have a plan in place by next year, which is the ambition.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Graham.
Thank you. Councillor Allibone.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Well, of course, we've all been encouraging cycling, especially in our towns and villages for many years. And I remember when they tarmacked the cycleway at the back of Stanwell Park in Wellingborough many years ago now, 12, 15 years ago. And everybody said, oh, we've got to have this tarmac. So, of course, we tarmacked it, and then they wanted it lit, and which was great for the cyclists. But then all the residents at Stanwell Way, whose gardens went down to the cycleway, said, well, of course, now you're lighting up our garden sheds and we get more breakage. So we seem to shoot ourselves in the foot. But I think a great kickstart, of course, to fitness generally and sustainability has been the success of our cycling teams in the Olympics. And this always has a knock-on effect after any Olympic Games. We've been especially successful in the track cycling and in BMX. And I think anything that encourages youngsters to take up a sport or a hobby, or actually, well, they're not old enough to drive, but it is a more sustainable form of transport. And if we can get younger people in it from an early age, I think that just needs encouraging. And I think there's this knock-on effect from the Olympics. We get it every time, every 4 years. And I think that's to be encouraged. But yes, I agree with other councillors. It's a great piece of work, and full marks to the team that put it together. Thank you.
Thank you. You raised some good points. We have medalists from the Olympics here in our area, which is fantastic to see, and they did amazingly well. Councillor Dell, if there weren't any comments back on those points raised.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to pick up actually, Councillor Allibone just mentioned the Olympics. Of course, active travel isn't just cycling, but also scooting and skateboarding as well. And of course, these LTN segregated cycle lanes, do have a very good tarmac surface for small wheels, such as on skateboards and scooters. I just wondered, does the school streets and things like play streets, do they come under the LC WIP? Because I know there's a school streets trial in Wellingborough, St Barnabas, and I was wondering when that trial ends, will that feed into the LC WIP as well? Councillor Lee also mentioned secure bike storage in town centres. I know we've got the one in Kettering at the train station, which is great, because as more people adopt e-bikes, they're more high value, so you're not really going to want to chain them up outside standard bike racks. So I think there's a few empty shops in Kettering town centre that could potentially look into using as like secure cycle storage. I know they do that in cities in London and things. It's great there's a social enterprise involved in this. Alison Holland massively improved my active travel knowledge over the last 18 months through being involved with Northampton Streets for All. So that's really good to see. The consultation in November, will that be through Commonplace as well? Will that be a new Commonplace survey? Because I was keen, I promoted the last one really well, and it was good to see how many responses were on that. I think it was over nearly 2,000 responses across the county on that. And I saw, I know there's loads of questions here, sorry. You don't have to respond to them all because I know we're running out of time. But I've seen recently there's 12, the government have opened up bids for 12 mini Hollands, which where towns, I think they convert a lot to cycling, these mini Holland schemes. When you talked about the stats for the hospital and the travel and things, will VOI stats be used for that? Because I know that VOI said that like they've got really good stats on where the e-scooters are being used up to Telford Way and for commuting and Burton Atom and things like that. So that would be good if that's being fed in. I presume it is. And like you said, there are barriers. So there's a place in Kettering called Furnace Lane, which used to be, I think, a public right of way. It's got a very long and complicated history, but it'd be a perfect link up to Telford Way Industrial Estate. However, I do know that, because it's in my ward, there is a lot of a controversy around it with the local residents whose houses have been built since that lane is closed. So I didn't know if that was being looked at, and just to know the sensitivities around that for people, for the residents. Regarding the stakeholders, too many. Who are the stakeholders, and how are they chosen? And is there opportunity for people to be involved? And onto Rushden and Higham. Has the LTM 120 affected the existing much? Because I know with the LTM 120 that the cycle lanes have to be, or mobility lanes have to be segregated from pathways now, from pedestrian pathways, which, as you said, Corby's got this really good wideness of the roads and things there with plenty of room. But of course, even in Kettering, at the moment there are shared cycleways, which if they were going to be LTM 120 compliant, then I guess that would need a lot of infrastructure work. And the only other thing was the bit at the end, which we couldn't hear from Nikki, which was a shame. But I was wondering which schools were planned, because it has 3 schools, and obviously there's more than 3 across the county, so I didn't know which schools were, where they were, and also the cycle security measures. I know the police do things like security marking and give advice on that as well, so I didn't know if we were linking in with the police. And yeah, community active travel events are great. I know in Wellingborough they have a critical mass, which is a mass bike ride around the town once a month, which would be really good to link into, I think. So yeah, sorry about all the questions, and don't feel like you've got to answer all of them.
Thank you, Councillor. All very good questions, great questions, and thanks very much for your positive engagement with it all, as with other members as well. Thank you. I'm not sure we'll be able to answer all those questions or give justice to them all just now. I wonder if we try and get back to you on those ones, Chair, mindful of time. What's your preference, Chair? Would you like us to try and tackle some of those now, or would you prefer us to do that in writing?
I think it would perhaps be useful to have that in writing, and then members can look through that in their own time. If you're happy with that, Councillor Dell.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Chair. What I suggest on that one is that I appreciate. No, I think you've got all your hands done. But yes, we will do a circular update, and we're very happy to come back at a later point as well as these plans develop, to give updates on progress and some of the findings as well, because I'm sure members here and members of the public who might be watching will be interested to see these develop. So very happy to do that, Chair, as you wish.
Yeah, I think that would be useful. Conscious we have still got one hand up, so Councillor O'Hara.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, I think a few questions have now been asked, which is good, and quite happy to have them emailed to me. But just touching on what Councillor Dell just said about the schools, just wondered how they were chosen, because we've only got 3 schools and it's 1,500 children. Where are they, and what schools were they? The other thing is the little bit about I'm talking about the section on the bikes, really, and what type of bikes are they that are going to be? Are they going to be loaned, or are they given to people in the community? And then if they are going to be given to people, how do we decide who's having what? Because the 50,000 it's a nice budget, but what can we buy, and how do we sort of disseminate it? And also it's the quality of the roads around the area, in terms of, yes, we've got these cycleways, pathways, etc. But you can't just stop riding your bike. I mean, I ride from here to we've ridden from here to Stamford. And back, and the difference in the quality of the roads is quite astounding, actually, depending on whereabouts in the county or outside of the county that you are. So it's kind of looking at the wider picture, which again interacts with what we've previously discussed in terms of our vision for the future. And also to kind of add on to that, looking at people getting fit and other forms of transport, is that you can also look at the outdoor gyms that we have tried in various country parks around our areas. And within that, there are some cycleways. We've got some in Button-Nutter that we've got like a mini cycle track there, but we've also got mini football pitches. And it's all about keeping children inspired and fit, and which helps improve their brain capacity, and obviously adults as well, and not to mention mental health. So I think it's a fabulous report. Like we said, everything we're doing today is a starting point, and we will build on that. But I think it's also looking at the capacity for the, within the cycle lanes, and indeed what's happening with scooters, which then leads me on to Voy, all their bikes and scooters have all got telematics within them, so that they would have some fantastic data as to where people are going on their bikes and scooters, how long they're on them for. I appreciate they're only using them for short journeys, but that stops the necessity for a car or even a motorbike. So although they can seem a little untidy as to where people leave them, people need to be a lot more aware of where they're leaving, let's put it politely. But I think they would be a fantastic resource to tap into because of the data that they will have that will help us with the analytics. So if we could kind of look at those, that would be absolutely fabulous. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you again, Councillor Hara, for those excellent questions. Again, I won't try and come back on all of them at the moment, but the added benefit of being online is, of course, we can re-watch this and get all those questions and make sure we haven't missed anything. So I suggest, Chair, that we handle that in the same way. We'll come back to you. And I know Councillor Dell and yourself mentioned the telematics from Voy. You're right, we get very granular data from Voy about trips and travel habits and desire lines and things like that. So we can certainly feed that into the data that we're analysing. I think that the purchase of the bikes, I think it's more a case of giving discount vouchers rather than actually giving out bikes, which is part of the answer to your question. But we'll come back with all those details in due course.
Perfect. That's really useful, and I think a really good introduction. As much as anything, it will be good to see the feedback on those questions as well. So thank you for the discussion around that and the input from officers. Really good. So we're now moving to agenda item 8, which is the close of the meeting. The date of the next meeting is the 22nd of September, which will be held via Zoom unless otherwise advised. So once again, thank you to everybody for their input, members, officers alike. A really detailed meeting today with lots of points that we've all come away with. So thank you all for attending and see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.